The Cincinnati Bengals have officially collected their first win of the 2019 regular season. Hey, everyone. It's Anthony Cosenza with CincyJungle.com and the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. Hope you are doing well on this Sunday afternoon. It's been nearly a full calendar year since the Cincinnati Bengals have won a football game. The last time they did so was on December 16th, 2018 against the Oakland Raiders. And almost a year later, 50 weeks later, I guess, they collect their first win of 2019 and beat the Jets. Beat the Jets pretty handily, 22-6. When the Bengals beat the Raiders last year in their last win, they handled them pretty well in that game as well. So at least the last two wins have been relatively decisive by the Cincinnati Bengals. Francisco Rodriguez says, finally from Mexico, Hude. Hola, Francisco. Thanks for tuning in, man. That's awesome. You're joining us from Mexico. There is a contingent of Bengals fans that will automatically feel not great about the team winning because obviously it affects their draft status. I'm going to tell you, though, you didn't want this team to go winless. Yeah, you still want them to get that number one overall pick, likely to use it on a Joe Burrow. Some of you want them to use them on Chase Young, whatever. You don't want this team to go winless. There are veterans that are playing with a high level of effort still. If you looked at this game today, almost every one of their better players, their veteran guys, their highest paid guys played very well. Andy Dalton played very well. Very easily could have had 3 touchdown passes instead of just 1. 2 drops by tight ends in the red zone. Killed his opportunities there. You look at Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap. Geno Atkins had a handful of tackles, a lot of pressures. Carlos Dunlap, 3 sacks, was everywhere today. Joe Mixon, not great in the stat line per se, but the effort level, you cannot question that guy's effort level at all this year. So there are things to feel good about, even for some of you who are not wanting a Cincinnati Bengals win because of draft positioning. By the way, speaking of that, though the Bengals won and they are now 1-11, they still hold the inside track to the number 1 overall pick. The New York Giants lost this week. They got stomped at home by the Green Bay Packers. They are 2-10 and sit right behind Cincinnati. They picked Daniel Jones as their quarterback last year, number 6 overall, though. So if the order holds out, or if there's maybe a tie there or whatever, the Giants aren't likely to pick a quarterback. They may, if they get ahead of the Bengals in draft order, there may be a trade out type of situation. But, for the most part, Cincinnati has that inside track at 1-11. Giants lost, as I mentioned, and then you had both the Redskins and the Dolphins winning today. Kind of some unlikely wins. The Dolphins beat the Eagles at home, and the Redskins beat Carolina in Carolina. So both of the teams now are 3-9, and they still have a 2-game gap behind the Bengals, and both of those are threats to potentially take a quarterback. So Cincinnati Bengals win, but they don't lose any ground really in draft positioning. So you have to kind of feel good about how things played out for them this week. Andrew Humphrey, I'm so happy I'm crying. Good day, Hude baby. I'm not going to judge anyone's reaction, but like I said, it's been a year. So, if you want to be emotional about it, go ahead. If you want to be emotional about it, go ahead. The Cincinnati Bengals dominated nearly every facet of the game. They had 4 sacks in the game, 3 by Carlos Dunlap, numerous pressures. Didn't create any turnovers, surprisingly, but really just swarmed the passing game. Did not let Sam Darnold do anything under center. Le'Veon Bell, his damage was limited as the Cincinnati Bengals defense really played very well. Darqueze Dennard batted a few passes away. It was just a really, really good day by the Cincinnati Bengals defense. I think you can also attribute this win greatly to the special teams unit. Kevin Huber had a great day punting the football. I think he had 3 punts inside the 20, one of which landed at the Jets' 2-yard line. A couple of plays later, Andrew Brown gets a pressure, and it causes a safety because of a holding call in the end zone. And that really it led to 5 total points, 2 for the safety. The Bengals got the ball and then drove down a little bit, got a field goal. So 5 total points, but really kind of ate up clock, just momentum-wise really turned the game. So special teams, a big day. Brandon Wilson had a couple nice returns. Randy Bullock did miss a 48-yard field goal. Shocking, I know. But he also had 2 other field goals, one of which was from 46 yards out. So did hit one other relatively deep field goal, but I get it. Windy day, not great weather, but these are the types of kicks you got to have kickers make in the NFL. And really that's a point of emphasis I think the Bengals need to look at in the offseason is the kicking game. Randy Bullock's had a decent year overall for the Bengals, but look, that when you look at kickers and when you look at quarterbacks and you're an AFC North team, you have to kind of evaluate those players a little differently than a lot of other teams in the NFL. You play in an outdoor stadium in poor weather. You play 6 games against very tough opponents, all in outdoor stadiums, usually in bad weather, especially as the year goes on. You need a guy with a big leg that can kick deep field goals and in not great weather circumstances. And you need a quarterback with a strong enough arm to handle wind, rain, all that stuff, all of the elements. So these are things that the Cincinnati Bengals, as they make their offseason evaluations and they look at those 2 positions specifically, you got to identify guys that can really cut through the weather issues, cut through the elements, because that comprises, like I said, those divisional games comprise 6 of the contest, basically more than a third of the total contests on the year. And then you've got your own games you're hosting. So you gotta be able to get points from your kicker, and you got to be able to have a quarterback that can, get through the elements and play productive football. So that's got to be in the equation this offseason. Speaking of quarterback play and in the elements, Andy Dalton, as I mentioned, played pretty well. This was probably one of his better performances, really. And maybe we say this because he sat the last 3 games and we saw abysmal quarterback play in the 3 games that he sat. But it seems like this was one of his more crisp performances really since the 2015 season. As I mentioned, he could have had 3 touchdowns today, 2 egregious drops especially the one by CJ Uzomah, but another that Tyler Eifert probably 8 or 9 times out of 10 catches in the end zone, contested ball, tough catch, but we've seen him make much more difficult plays than that. So, a little bit tough there. Dalton could have had 3 touchdowns. Luckily, the Bengals capitalized on one of those opportunities, got a touchdown, and the other they got a field goal. So, really didn't cost them all that much, but statistically speaking, could have been a much better day from Andy Dalton. Had those plays been made by his receivers there. He and Tyler Boyd seem to be clicking well. Tyler Boyd had a nice day. There was the very first play of the game. Dalton sailed. The very first pass play of the game, Dalton sailed one over Tyler Boyd that could have been a big play down the seam, and you kind of thought, oh boy, is this kind of signs of things to come? But Dalton settled in, was kind of ripping the ball around. He threw some into some tight windows. Guys like Auden Tate bailed him out of some situations, so you got to like that. Tyler Boyd made a nice catch in traffic as for that first touchdown. So you gotta like all of that. And Cincinnati, as I mentioned, comes out victorious 22-6. Really, all 3 phases played pretty well for the Cincinnati Bengals. Really, the only big issue was just the Randy Bullock missed field goal, and that was from 48 yards in the wind. So, not terrible there. Cincinnati's offensive line did not play all that well. Only 44 yards rushing for Joe Mixon this week. 4 yards for Giovanni Bernard. Joe Mixon, 19 carries, 44 yards, 2.3 yard per carry average, so not great there. Andy Dalton, 22 of 37 for 243, and the 1 touchdown pass to Tyler Boyd. No one receiving-wise really popped out. I was talking about Tyler Boyd, 5 catches, 59 yards on 10 targets. So, got to tighten that one up a little bit. Auden Tate, 4 catches, team leading 66 yards on 7 targets. CJ Uzomah did have 5 catches for 51 yards, but that one drop really kind of put not a great a mar on his day there. So don't like that. Kevin Huber, as I mentioned, 5 punts, 47.6 yard per punt average, and 3, as I've said before, 3 of those were inside the 20-yard line. Big day from him. So all in all, each unit did things to help the Bengals win, and really kind of a team effort. You got to feel good for Zac Taylor for everything he's been through, both inside and outside of his own control, his own decisions, all of that. You have to feel pretty good for him, at least to get this one win. This team is not going to go winless. It wouldn't be surprising if this team wins, 2 or 3 more games to close out the season. They're playing with high energy. They're playing with a high level of effort. Andy Dalton's playing. You could tell he's got a lot of passion still. And, you gotta wonder if this is going to be one of those patented late season Bengals runs when they're out of the picture, and we've seen them do it a number of times. We would be remiss if we didn't congratulate Andy Dalton on passing Ken Anderson as the Bengals team leader in touchdown passes. He's at 198. Could have actually, like I mentioned, sat at 200 today had those other 2 been caught. But congratulations to him. I know feelings are mixed on him both this year and really, kind of today, and his entire career feelings have been mixed on him. But basically, if you saw the graphic, if you watched the game today, in every major statistical category, completion percentage, passing yards, touchdowns, all that stuff, he's either 1 or 2. He's 1 or 2 as a Cincinnati Bengals quarterback. So all time, and take that with what you will. Some people may scoff at that and say, well, maybe the Bengals quarterback history isn't as decorated as many teams. That's true, but he's been a solid quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, and his statistics prove it. Yes, he needs help. Yes, he needs talent around him, but he's one of the best quarterbacks to have suited up for the Cincinnati Bengals, regardless of what's happened this year and regardless of the playoff issues. Statistically speaking, he's up there with Ken Anderson, Boomer Esiason, and Carson Palmer as some of the best players at the position to ever play for the team. I'm seeing, what a day. Thank God. Mike Holbrook. What's up, Mike? Finally, hell froze over. I'm seeing Lou Bauer's dead cat bounds. I like that. Deborah Shields. This is a good question. Where has his passion been all season? I really began to notice a turn in attitude. The defense has really played pretty well over the past 3 weeks. Now they played the Jets. They played a beat up Steelers offensive unit, and they played the Raiders. The Raiders are real Jekyll and Hyde. So it's hard to really get a gauge on exactly how good things are or how positively things are moving in the direction of 2020. It's easy to point out the passion today because they were winning. They had the lead. They were playing well. Every facet was playing well. Every unit was doing their job for the most part. And you saw the fun they were having today. You saw them going after the passer. You saw them going after the football on defense. You saw Joe Mixon kind of, even though running room was scarce, you saw him go and celebrate and do his little, patented first down celebration. He was jubilant when he got in the end zone. So it's easy to point all that out today when they finally win and you go, where was the passion? Where is the effort? I said this earlier today. The effort level's been there. That's one thing you have to kind of credit. There have been a couple of games here and there where you go, okay, you kind of mailed this one in. I think of the second Ravens game in Ryan Finley's first start, especially on defense. I think for portions of when the game got out of control against the 49ers, I think there was some issues there. But I saw the team in week 1, the passion, the effort level, everything was there. I saw them in person in Seattle. That wasn't a question there. And I think these last 3-4 weeks when the Bengals have been in it, you've seen some of the passion, you've seen the effort level, especially from, as I mentioned, when your high-priced veterans if they were not playing well, if they were mailing it in, if they were not making plays and not hustling, that would be a big indictment of Zac Taylor and his coaching staff. But that hasn't been the case. You saw today, Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap were the major forces. And it's, by the way, it's not coincidental that those two guys play very well and everyone else behind them ends up playing well. When that defensive line goes, the rest of the team goes. Sam Hubbard also had a good day today. Andrew Brown up front, not many snaps, but really maximizing his opportunities, getting a handful of pressures, one of which caused that hold in the end zone for a safety. So the defensive line played very, very well today. Again, hard to know exactly how good this team can be, how big of steps these seemingly better contests, better showings these past few weeks, what that means for 2020, and if that bodes well in the form of, hey, this team's close. There was another graphic today, and we've said this on our program. The Bengals coming into today were tied for second in the NFL with one possession losses or one possession deciding games this year. They had a number of those at the end of last year. That's why they said if we're healthy, we think we can win. Well, that's not the case. Yes, they need to get healthy and be more lucky on that front in 2020, but they need to create their own luck. They need to be more aggressive in free agency. They need to get more higher impact, immediate impact guys in the draft to be able to do that. But I don't think this team isn't good. Don't get me wrong. This team isn't good. There are holes and issues everywhere. I don't know that they're 1-11 bad. I don't know that they're maybe worst team in the league bad. I think there's been some luck. There's been some the injury issues. There's been all kinds of stuff that has plagued them. Obviously, the inexperience on the staff. I think they are one of the worst teams in the league, as evidenced by their record. But I don't think they're 1-11 bad. And I think if they make some right moves, some right decisions at critical areas next year, they spend a little more money than they're used to in free agency, and they hit on at least a couple of their high picks this next year, I think that's going to go a long way going forward. I'm Anthony Cosenza with CincyJungle.com and the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We do these post-game analyses after every game, so thank you for joining us. We started a little later today because our provider StreamYard was having some issues, but we were able to make it work and join you a little bit after the game. You can check us out after every game, as I mentioned, or our Orange and Black Insider podcast is usually recorded on Wednesday evenings. It will be Tuesday evening for those of you interested this week, just due to some scheduling stuff. But check that show out. We also do listener questions where we answer your questions on the air. Like I said, we do the post-game stuff. And then there are a couple of other shows as well that are on the Cincy Jungle podcast slate. So join us live on Cincy Jungle's Facebook page, on the Orange and Black Insider YouTube channel, or if you are a podcast downloader, get the show and the slate of shows really through a variety of different channels and podcast providers. We're on most, if not all, major ones. So check us out. We'll be here for a few more minutes talking Bengals and their 22-6 win against the Jets. I understand. I understand some of these sentiments. Bad, National Football Legend, NFL, bad thing. You are your record, Keith Thompson. Fair, that's fair. The Bengals suck. I mean, I'm seeing all this stuff. I get it. But you've spent a year complaining. I mean, at least for a couple of hours, maybe enjoy a win that you haven't savored since last year. I mean, they didn't fall back in draft positioning. They stayed put. They still have the number one pick. For all of you people that want Joe Burrow or Chase Young, they're still in line to get one of those guys and their pick of those guys. So it hasn't been a good year, guys. I'm not making excuses for them. I don't think that this team is 1-11 bad. As we predicted this summer, and very unwisely predicted, this team we felt, meaning me and my co-host John Sheeran on our show, we felt that this team, really could have been not so great, maybe in the 5-6 win range, or surprise some people, maybe get to that 9-win range. After week one, we kind of, when they lose to Seattle in Seattle by a point, you kind of felt like, well, hey, this team might be surprising some people this year. You felt pretty good about things. And then things snowballed out of control. They kept losing people, and the people that they kept playing really weren't playing very well. So there are a lot of holes. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of holes to be fixed this offseason. I would not expect this to be the team's only win the rest of the way, though. I think that they're going to play hard to try and get some momentum into 2020. That may not make a lot of fans happy because of the draft slotting and all of that. They don't care about that as much as you do. I'm going to tell you that. The guys in that locker room that are under contract and getting paid, they're not saying we're going to lose just so we can get Joe Burrow. That's not what they're thinking about. They're thinking about going out there, playing hard, getting their money, and thinking about 2019. They're not really thinking about 2020. Maybe the coaches and ownership have an eye on 2020, but not the players, I'm telling you. I saw someone ask, thanks, Ricky Paul, for the compliment there. I saw a question. Oh, this is good, from Marquise Keys. That's right. The guy on the roof, the Bengals fan on the roof, he can finally leave his roof on December 1st. He can come down. Thanks for reminding me about that. That's hilarious. He can come down from off the roof and join his family and not have to do that. His strike is over. We'll see if he maintains his his word there. Thanks for reminding me about that. That's pretty funny. Someone asked about, though, do you think they tag AJ Green? I think that's the move you make. Because then if you don't tag AJ, that doesn't mean tag and don't extend him long term, but you got to tag him, because then you tag him and you're able to either trade him to someone else, or you tag him and you keep him long term. So you have to do that. If your plan was to keep AJ Green for either Andy Dalton in 2020 or a new quarterback in 2020, you have to keep. You didn't trade him at the deadline, so you have to get him under a form of a contract to be able to either trade him in the spring or to extend him long term, to be kind of, hey, finish your career with us, maybe with a new quarterback, maybe in another bridge year with Andy Dalton. Finish your career with us. We'll pay you money. Let's do it that way. The Cincinnati Bengals, since they did not deal him at the trade deadline, they stood steadfast in that they cannot afford to lose AJ Green in an outright free agency battle. They need to hang on to him and then either trade him or hang on to him long term. That would be a very bad look if the Bengals did not deal him for anything before the trade deadline this year, and then sit on him and don't play him, don't end up paying him, and then they lose him probably to somebody, the either a division rival or somebody. So that is not what you want to do. I think the Bengals should at a minimum franchise AJ Green. Do not franchise Andy Dalton. They should franchise tag AJ Green, and then you figure out, okay, will somebody be willing to give up a first round pick for a franchise to get a franchise tagged guy? Even the lesser used transition tag may be a way to go, but I would still do the franchise tag if you're unable to get a long-term deal in place, and then you figure out whether you want to get the long-term deal or you trade him down the road and get something for him. You have to get something for him if you're not going to hang on to him long term. You just have to. You'd like to get, you'd like to have him here to potentially and be the AJ Green of old, especially if you're going to go in the Joe Burrow direction, the Tua direction, Justin Herbert, whoever. A new quarterback, having a veteran wide receiver that really can do it all when he's healthy, you'd like to have that guy around. You'd also like to have him around because he's got good rapport with Andy Dalton. If Andy Dalton is in the plans for a bridge year in 2020, I don't know if that's the case, but we'll see in a few short months. But my point being, you've got a veteran receiver. The other thing with that is if you don't keep AJ Green, you've got now another hole to fill, a big hole to fill at another position, and a position that directly affects potentially a new quarterback. Usually a rookie receiver and rookie quarterback thrown out there day one, that doesn't always lead to great results. There's a lot of miscommunication. They're still both learning the playbook. You want to have some veteran guys. That leaves you with John Ross, a guy who is an explosive player but is often injured. You've got Tyler Boyd, and then you've got Auden Tate and a couple of other guys that are just there. You lose AJ Green, that's a big loss, and especially if you are unable to get a big draft pick for him. And it just, you've already got to address a number of positions on the offensive line, but you got to address quarterback. You've now got to address wide receiver if you lose AJ Green. It's just kind of a lot, especially if you're trying to turn things around quickly, which I know the Cincinnati Bengals are. I saw this Joseph Stop. AJ Green's a quitter, just admitted. I'm never going to admit that. I think he is making a business decision, but I think that I am not going to call him a quitter. Sorry. I just, if he's not ready to play, he's not ready to play. I think maybe he would be more inclined to return to the lineup if the Bengals were fighting for a playoff spot, a division lead, that sort of thing. Maybe he would be more inclined to push it. But he's got to look out for himself. He wants to play in the league a few more years, and every time the Bengals are giving him a long leash and saying, when you're ready, we're ready. So you do what you need to do. And I think also, by the way, that nobody's talking about with how the Bengals and AJ Green are handling this situation, this is potentially building collateral in the Bengals corner, like emotional collateral, if you want to call it that, when it comes time to talk about contracts and discuss this negotiation with AJ Green in this forthcoming contract. The fact that the Bengals are like, hey, AJ, do what you got to do. You don't want to play right now. You don't feel like you're ready. We're not going to push you. We already saw what happened with that with Cordy Glenn. We saw the results of that, and that didn't end well. Luckily, he's come back and played. Okay. This is a very important player for the Cincinnati Bengals, and one that they want to potentially lock up long-term. AJ Green has expressed the desire to come back. If the Bengals try and push him in a season where they have 1 win, 2 wins with only a couple of games remaining, and he's not 100%, he goes back out there, hurts it again, that creates a terrible situation and may ruin any kind of goodwill from both sides if the Bengals are pushing him to play when he's not ready to play. So you have to keep that this is a long-term play for AJ Green. This is not a get back out there and trying to get us 2 more wins in a season where we may win 3 or 4 games total. You want to see him play, and you want to make sure he's healthy enough to give him a big contract, but he is a guy, what he's got when he's out there and healthy. If the Bengals are looking to keep on hanging on to him long-term, let him heal up. Don't pressure him. And that's, I think, going to build some goodwill between the parties as the offseason negotiations go forward. But we'll close up here just in a couple of minutes, but let's close up talking it once again a little bit, recapping the game. The Bengals beat the Jets for their first win of the season, 22-6. Really dominated every single facet of the game. They pressured the quarterback well. They actually protected Andy Dalton relatively well. There wasn't a ton of pressure. Andy Dalton did not have the same run game, though, that Ryan Finley was privy to in the previous 3 starts. As I mentioned, just 44 yards net rushing. Andy Dalton had -4 yards, Giovanni Bernard 4 yards, and Joe Mixon 44 yards. Mixon was averaging about 93 yards the past 3 games. So, definitely not the same balance, but Andy Dalton was throwing the ball relatively well, was efficient, and the team comes out with a win. Special teams played really well, especially aside from one missed field goal from Randy Bullock. Defense played pretty well. William Jackson got victimized a little bit. Some of that was in garbage time, but did allow Robbie Anderson to have a 100-yard game on him, which was kind of rare. William Jackson has quietly played pretty well. Limited completion percentages and yards and all of that. So a little bit of an off day for him, but overall a really good day by the defense. 4 sacks, pressured Darnold a ton of times, and, just kind of set the tone for the day and set it pretty early. Aside from letting up that opening drive field goal, they really clamped down on things. Good point by Lou Bowers. Mixon did have a big, I think it was a 23 or so yard run that was called back on a holding call that really wasn't a hold on Auden Tate, but so his stats would have looked a little better there. I don't know. Yeah, Robert Obrecht here says, what does it prove? Talking about AJ Green, if he comes back and plays, he's worth 18 to 19 million. To me, I think that the situation really wasn't handled very well in terms of assessing the injury. I think you could have shelved him early on and maybe gone out and got a veteran wide receiver on the free agent market, kind of a Brandon LaFell type, one of those guys where you can kind of, hey, we've got a veteran guy, we've got some depth. I know you want to see what you've got from AJ Green, but obviously as weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks go on, you would kind of think at the point that they were maybe benching Andy Dalton, maybe you say, you know what, AJ, just heal up. Let's talk contract. We'll get another guy just to kind of fill some shoes. And I think that aspect was poorly handled. But I think, like I said, I think they're playing it real white glove treatment here because they want to keep him long-term. I do think the Bengals also have probably learned their lesson from losing an Andrew Whitworth and valuable guys at the end of their careers that they probably should have hung on to. And it's not only hurt the team from an on-field perspective, but, it's lost fans. Today, you'll read about it on CincyJungle.com. Today, the Bengals set a record for low attendance. And if you saw that game today, there was nobody there. These are the types of things that, you lose. If you lose out on an AJ Green, let him walk. You lost Andrew Whitworth, one of your most well-liked and productive players in recent memory. You let him go. These are the types of decisions that turn fans off and lead to these attendance things. So, I think for now, them playing the white glove treatment with AJ Green, it's frustrating. I want to see him out there too, but if it leads to better long-term things and it leads to him coming in 2020, being healthy, helping either the new quarterback, Andy Dalton, whoever, because they rested him this year and didn't force him to get another procedure late in 2019 or in early 2020, that's what you want. That's what you want. Anyway, Zabu Goose Fraba says, now Anthony, that's funny. I don't know what I said that's funny, but I'm a funny guy, I guess. I don't know. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We're going to get out of here. The Bengals win. They beat the Jets in Week 13, 22-6. Dominating fashion. They do not lose any draft positioning either. They still hold, as of Sunday afternoon, they hold the number 1 overall pick with their 1-11 record. The Giants are right behind them at 2-10. Then you have both the Redskins and the Dolphins with 3-9 records. Believe it or not, the Redskins are still mathematically alive in the NFC East, if you can believe that one, with a 3-9 record, but go figure. But those are that's the top 4, and Cincinnati still sits at number 1 overall, even though they've got that one win today. This has been a live post-game breakdown courtesy of CincyJungle.com on its Facebook page and the Orange and Black Insider YouTube channel. Get the Orange and Black Insider podcast along with others that are part of the Cincy Jungle podcast channel on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, Megaphone. It's on iHeartRadio. I mentioned our YouTube channel, and all the stuff is on CincyJungle.com. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll be talking to you this week, breaking down prospects and talking all things Bengals coming up here this week. So check it out. Keep it to CincyJungle.com for news, opinions, analysis, everything else. And enjoy the rest of your weekend, especially now that the Bengals no longer have a goose egg in the win column. See ya.